Okay, so this is a talk about trade and currency. And it's just kind of to illustrate the two are intertwined. Currency changes can significantly influence trade, and trade, increased demand for a country's goods, can significantly influence currency values. And so the two certainly have a feedback relationship between each other. But let's just look at a mathematical example of imports and exports for a country. In this case, the United States. And let's say that a weighted basket of currency, let's just call it foreign currency to general, a weighted basket of US dollars versus this foreign currency, FC over USD, is currently 2 to 1. So $1 would buy 2 units of this foreign currency. Maybe this foreign currency is something like the IMF's weighted basket of large currencies or whatever. But let's just say that this is the current exchange rate, the spot rate, and that currently the exports, the price of them in dollar terms is, say, $20. And the price of imports that the U.S. imports from all these other countries is 12 in terms of this foreign currency per U.S. dollar. And the U.S. imports and exports, does trade with other countries. In fact, it exports goods of a particular amount. That export amount is 100 units. Let's just call them units of physical stuff. And it imports less, but it imports 12 units of stuff. And let's say the value of the dollar subsequently depreciates. That means that the worth of the dollar declines in value. So what's going to happen is that $1 now buys fewer of a foreign currency. And let's say that the percentage basis by which the dollar depreciates is 18%. So the dollar depreciates by 18%. So I really have 2 questions that I'd like to answer given these numbers. And question number 1 is, what's the trade balance before depreciation? And question number 2 is then, what's the trade balance after depreciation, after the currency changes? And to answer these 2 questions, we really have to look at, in dollar terms, how much is being imported and exported, and in foreign currency terms, how much is being imported and exported. And how does that change when the value of the dollar changes? So we have a few steps to answer these 2 questions. And first is to figure out revenue for the U.S. in terms of exports. So that would be the price of the exports, which in this case for the U.S. is $20, multiplied by how much they actually exported, which is 100 units. So that gives us $2,000. The U.S. at the beginning exported $2,000 worth. Okay, and then we also need to figure out revenue in terms of imports. And that is done similarly. That is going to be so the price of imports is going to be 12. And the amount imported, actually, sorry, this should be 120 units, not 12. So 12 times 120 equals 1,440. Since this is imports in terms of foreign currency, this is 1,440 units of foreign currency, and then this is 2,000 in terms of USD. So, pre-depreciation, we had revenues from exports, in summary, of 2,000, but we imported, the U.S. imported 1,440. This is in foreign currency, and this is in terms of USD. So revenue from imports, so if we need to look at this in terms of USD, we can take the pre-depreciation exchange rate of 2, and since $1 buys 2 units of foreign currency, then we know that if we're translating, so in dollar terms, imports in terms of USD are going to be $720. So in this case, our trade balance is a positive 720. But if the US dollar depreciates, so if the dollar depreciates, it buys fewer foreign currency, and in fact, it buys 18% fewer foreign currency, and that means $1 buying 2 units of foreign currency now can only buy 1.64 units of foreign currency per USD. So if the US still exports in terms of US dollars, and so if we want to figure out the effect of the trade balance, exports minus imports, after the currency changes, the only thing that we need to change in the after state is this number right here, the revenue from imports in terms of USD. And if we, let's say, create a new line here, that's the revenue in terms of USD after depreciation. We imported 1,440 units of foreign currency, and let's say that number stays the same, then the only thing that we need to change is what this is worth under the new exchange rate. And so how do we go from this amount of foreign currency into US dollars? Yeah, and the answer is that we divide. So we take this 1,440 units of foreign currency. We know that $1 buys more foreign currency, and so if we're going to go the other way around, we're going to get a number that's smaller. And to do that with this number, we divide. We take the 1,440 and divide by 1.64. And that number is 878 USD. If we're going to look at the trade balance, then we need one final thing, and that's just the change in terms of we went from exports staying the same, but going from 1440 to 720 US dollars to 878 US dollars in terms of imports. So our imports here actually increased in terms of US dollar terms because of the US dollar depreciation. And this is the idea behind something called the J-curve adjustment path. Countries sometimes try to increase exports because they want to promote economic activity, and one ways where they'll try to increase exports is by lowering the value of the currency, by devaluing or depreciating the currency. And the thing about that is there's this sort of J-curve dynamic where the effect that has on the balance of trade is to initially cause like a detrimental impact. Because of this currency adjustment, the cost of your imports are initially rising, and that's offsetting. It takes time for exports to kick in and sort of produce a positive trade balance. And so your balance on trade sort of tanks initially when there's a currency depreciation. And only after a longer period of time does your trade balance improve because of increased exports when you try to depreciate or devalue, depending on how you do it, the currency. So in this case, we went from 720 to 878 in terms of the amount of imports in US dollar terms that we had to make. And that is a decrease in the balance of trade by an amount of $158.